Hello, welcome to photographytv.com. During this episode, we're going to talk about shutter speed. We're going to define what shutter speed is, and we're going to take some examples of what different shutter speeds will do and the effect it has on photographs. So just to simply define shutter speed is, think about it, it's really self-explanatory. It's exactly how fast the shutter stays open when you click the button. So the reason that's important, number one, is it controls the amount of light that's going to hit the sensor. So the longer the shutter stays up, the more light is passing through and hitting the sensor. So if it's really dark out, you need a slower shutter speed to let more light in to properly expose the picture. And the brighter it is, the faster you need that shutter speed to go to let less light in. So shutter speed controls light. That's first and foremost. Now, the reason we're outside, we're going to be turning on the waterfall for the pool here in just a moment, because not only does it control the amount of light, shutter speed also controls the effect that the image has, meaning the longer the shutters open, the more movement is captured in the image. The faster the shutter speed is, the less movement is captured, or you can essentially freeze movement. And we're going to show you that with some examples here with the waterfall. So before we do that, a quick tip on shutter speed is that if you want an action shot, maybe you're at a sporting event or something like that, a fast shutter speed will freeze the movement. If you want to show movement in the photograph, maybe show water silky smooth, which is what you're going to see here with longer exposures, you can do a longer exposure. So those are a little bit of tips on the effect that the image will have. I'm now going to turn the waterfall on, and we're going to go through 4 different shutter speeds and actually show you the visual impact that it has to the photograph just by freezing water or using longer exposure to show movement in water. So let me go ahead and turn the waterfall on, and we'll do 4 different shutter speeds to get that started. All right, so I just turned the waterfall on, and we're going to do 4 different shutter speeds to show you the impact and the visual impact that it changes in the photograph. Now, I've set the camera to shutter priority, and all that means is that the only thing I'm controlling is the shutter speed. I'm going to let the camera make the rest of the adjustments to get the proper exposure. So the 4 different shutter speeds that we're going to do with the waterfall, the first is going to be 1/1000th of a second. That's a very fast shutter. 1/1000th of a second is all that it's open. The second one we're going to do 1/125th of a second. So 1/125th of a second. Then we're going to go down to 1/10th of a second, which is relatively slow. And then to really exaggerate it, we're going to go to 1 second. So we're going to go from really fast, 1/1000th of a second, to really slow, open for an entire full second. So let's go ahead and do this and show you what impact it has. Here's 1/1000th of a second. So you'll notice in 1/1000th of a second, if you zoom in, you can see the water beads frozen in action, because 1/1000th of a second, it's freezing that motion. That's really key with a fast shutter speed. Next, let's change it. Let's dial it down. Instead of 1/1000th, let's go down to 1/125th of a second. Still somewhat fast. I'd say this is more mid-range. Okay, and so you can see the water's not nearly as frozen in place as 1/1000th, because this is quite a bit slower at 1/125th, but there's still some freezing of action with 1/125th of a second in the water in this case. Now, as I go down next, I'm going down to 1/10th of a second. This is why I have the tripod. 1/10th of a second is pretty slow. In fact, the rule of thumb, if you're holding your camera, really important rule of thumb, if you're holding your camera not using a tripod, you do not want to go to a slower shutter speed than what your focal length of your lens is. So a simple rule of thumb, if my lens is, let's say, 50 millimeters distance, 50 millimeter lens, I would not want to go below 1/50th of a second. Anything less than 1/50th on a 50 millimeter lens, you run the risk of the shutter so slow that your hand shakes the camera. So it's a simple rule of thumb. Don't go below the focal length of your lens on your shutter speed. That's why I'm using a tripod, because 1/10 of a second is definitely lower than the millimeter. I'm shooting at about 70 millimeters on this lens. So here's 1/10 of a second. And now you can start to see the difference of a slower shutter speed. It's capturing the motion of the water because the shutter is open for an entire 1/10 of a second, which is pretty slow compared to that first one at 1/1000th of a second where it froze the water. Let's do the last one here at 1 full second, and you can really see the impact. All right, there you have it. And that's a pretty cool shot. That's the fun of getting movement in water. The longer the shutter is open, that silky smooth water look starts to come into place. And again, the tripod is key for those longer exposures. So hopefully you got a good effect or understanding of what shutter speed is and the impact that it can have on photographs. Start shooting in shutter priority and try different shutter speeds, either with water or just different experiments, so you can really learn the effect that it's going to have on your photograph. And remember, if you're shooting sports or action, go with a fast shutter speed to freeze that motion. If you need to show the visual effect like water, go with a slower shutter speed and use the tripod. And so that allows you to really understand shutter speed, and now get out there and start practicing and have fun changing the different shutter speeds. Thanks for watching this video on photographytv.com. As a next step, I encourage you to check out this free ebook on taking better pictures, and I'll give you 10 tips on capturing the best images of your life. So click this, submit your email, and get this free ebook and join our newsletter. Thanks for watching this video on photographytv.com.